Let me ask you a question, bro, because this is so weird to me, and I don't think I asked you this last time you were on the show. How did you end up on that show?
Man, I'm still trying to figure this whole thing out, bro. Like, I got an office in New York with my
Yeah.
PlayStation, and honestly, man, I real talk. I had just come back from Impact. We went to work with y'all over in, uh,
Mexico.
and we did the tournament.
Remember
And
that match? It was you against Daga, and he got hurt like two
yeah,
minutes
no,
in.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, he hurt his ankle,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
I felt. And the funny part was because I stayed with him in the little tent, right? And homie was in the tent, and he was hurting for a minute, and then somebody brought him a cigarette, but it was a little tent. He smoked like 3 cigarettes while waiting for the doc. Bro, I thought I was gonna die in that tent. But I was like, nah, you stay with them when they get hurt. But no, it was way back before that. It was a tournament. It was like everybody from everywhere came over there,
Oh, the
and
World Cup, maybe?
it was a cup.
Yeah.
And Impact didn't win one cup.
Right,
We
right,
got smoked.
right.
And at the time, a couple of the champs there were like, "Oh man, I really can't get pinned." And so I was
Yeah,
like, "No, I got you, I got you." So I got to work everybody.
yeah.
So and there was a young kid you guys were pushing with Ray, and we were in a 6-man tag, and it was the same thing. They were like, "Man, I really can't." I was like, "You gotta be kidding me!" But
What a
but
mark.
I got to work everybody, so I had a blast.
Yeah.
But
You were always easy to work with, anyways.
and I came back, and I got it. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning. And on Twitter, Greg and some other dude were arguing, and I was like, I don't know who these dudes are. Why am I tagged in their? And
Right.
apparently, the dude said you're as fake as wrestling, and had a gift of the Funkasaurus dancing. And I was like, oh, so usually I don't. I was like, oh, okay. So I hit the dude up who was talking trash, and I was like, look, man, you don't know me, homie, and maybe if you did, you wouldn't talk like this. How about this? What if I? Because I was living in Tampa at the time. I was like, what if I fly you down to Tampa? We get some beers, catch a Bucks game, and you have a better perspective on wrestling and stuff. He's like, oh man, cool. Could I do that? Could I bring my homeboy? And I said no, and I
Now,
blocked
who
him.
is this person you're talking about?
He was talking about Greg Gutfeld, and
Oh,
I slayed here, and then I forgot I didn't block Greg because he didn't even say anything. Next day, Gutfeld's messaged me like, man, I'm still laughing at what you did to that dude. And he's like, would you want to come on my show? And I was like, what show is that? And he's like, oh, the Great Gutfeld Show. It's a comedy show. I said, name Gutfeld?
now
You know,
were you politically,
I was
at
always
that, or
like,
did you become, yeah,
no, when I was in the WWE, Glenn Kane, he was super political and smartened us up a lot of things financially, things that we didn't really know about, things that I didn't really pay attention to. And I became a student of the game because he was very conservative. And I was like, no, nah, man, that's just white dudes in suits. And he's like, no, you're dumb. Small government is better for everybody. So then I educated myself, and I was like, also didn't like the taxes that I had to pay. And I was like, the more money I made, the more money went out. And then I started paying attention. And I was like, oh no, I'm a conservative. Like hell. And the more I learned about it, so, but I just didn't, we don't talk about stuff like that. Nobody really, you don't talk about what you do with your wife in the bedroom, and you don't
right,
talk about politics or religion in the locker room. You just don't. And every
right,
once, like Daniel Bryant and Kane would always be talking about saving our money. Even John Laurinaitis would come in and be like, "Hey, make sure you're putting this percentage of your money away and this, that, whatever." Because most of the time we're like, "Yeah, okay," but
right.
when it's coming from one of the boys, especially someone like Kane, you pay attention. So that's how it really started. But once he asked me to do the show, I just thought it was a one-off. I was going on there because I kind of felt like maybe he was trying to make wrestlers look dumb because sometimes they like to bring us on shows.
They think
Right,
Trying to,
the perceptions people think we're dumb.
yeah,
Right, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
right. Meatheads.
Yeah, Disco knows what I'm talking about. And I went on there with the intention of just smoking it. And the first question he asked me was like a Royal Grande and her boyfriend were licking donuts in the store in Florida and putting it back. And like, he's like, do you need notes or anything? And I was like, nah. And he's like, well, we can film it because they filmed it in pieces back then. And he was like, hey, we'll just film it right now. I was like, all right, cool. And said his spiel, and he says, what do you think about them licking donuts? And I'm like, gross, Greg. Back to you.
Right,
And he just started, he couldn't stop laughing. He's like, man, it's just simple. I'm like, that's it.
right.
And did a couple of things, and that was it. And then first commercial break, he was like, bro, your timing is like unreal. I'd love to have you as a co-host or something if you lived in New York. I'm like, I don't. And at that time, I'm at TNA, moving up the ladder and all that stuff, and I'm thinking about going to Japan and things like that. So I was really focused on my wrestling career. So doing New York gigs on the Gutfeld would have really hurt my indie stuff. So I was like, man, maybe once a month, if I have some downtime. And it just kind of grew from there. Maybe three or four appearances after that stuff came up about police brutality, and I just spoke on it. And he called me up and he's like, man, Fox wants you, man. He's like, how much you making in wrestling right now? I was like, huh? He's like, how much you making in wrestling right now?
Yeah.
And Impact wasn't cutting checks like WWE
Yeah.
were. And he's like, I don't know, what are you making, like 150, 175 a year? And I was like,
Yeah.
yeah. And he's like, all right, how's 185? And I was like, hold on, man, let me call my accountant. Hung up the phone, counted 5, called back. I was like, yeah, man. And it's crazy.
How long
man.
have you been there?
14 years, bro.
What?
Yeah. It's almost 10. I think 14 because I was thinking about something else. It'll be 10 years in a couple months.
You know what happened? Check this out. So I had forgotten you were on that show, right? So I never watched it. And I was in the hospital. I told you for like a month. And I'm flipping through and I see you. And I go, oh, this on this show. And then I remember what time it was. So I saw it the next day and then the next day and then the next day. I saw when you brought in Undertaker, Kane, I think was on the same show. And the guy, the Aaron, whatever, what's his name?
Sandow, yeah.
Sandow, yeah. And and Bully Ray.
Yep.
Yeah, so you bring a lot of the boys.
Jericho's on with me on Thursday.
Oh, sweet. So I want to ask you a question because you said this on the show and I didn't even know about this. I want to know how this even happened and what was your impression. You said that I didn't even know you had a podcast, but it said that you had Trump on your podcast. How did that even happen?
Well, what happened was I did an interview with Trump, but before that, Trump was coming to do the Gutfeld show.
Right.
And during this time, this guy who makes red belts, the guy with red belts, because when I won the NWA championship, the belt was little and it was beat up. And I was like, man, I'm trying to bring the NWA back. So I called him. I said, man, I need one as big as the old WCW World Championship NWA. I needed to go. I'm going to spin because it's going to be on national TV with every night. So he made the belt for me. And he then reached out to me a few months later and he was like, hey, I made this belt for President Trump. And people think at Fox, like he's like in the hallway and like drinking coffee with us and shit. Like he's not. I met the man once on a Monday Night Raw and it was like a handshake, and so I had never met him. Now, Greg had a relationship with him and, he was a fan of the show and apparently he was a big fan of me. I wasn't paying attention to this. And when he came to do the Gutfeld show, I had this Trump championship, so I'm going to give him the belt. So when we came down to meet him before we go in the green room, we come in, Greg goes first. He says, what's up? Cat comes in. When I stepped in, he threw his hands up and he was like, Tyrus, you're my favorite, man. I don't even watch when you're not on. And the whole place was like, and I looked at the Fox brass like, yeah. And I looked at the Fox brass like, y'all got to pay me. And the show was like, he was cool, he was fun, but like he was just dapping me up. And when I gave him that belt, man, he was just shook. And then here's the crazy part. Apparently people give him gifts and then take them back.
What?
Or they're not real because he kept saying like, this is a real one. Here's still, we all know that President Trump is a wrestling fan.
Right.
Like from back in the day, boxing, wrestling.
Big Andre fan.
Yeah, huge
Big Andre fan, yeah.
And I thanked him for WrestleMania 4 and 5. I was like, first of all, for my childhood, thank you for WrestleMania 4 and 5. And we just hit it off on the show. And then I gave him the belt and he went like, nah. I was like, man, it's yours, Mr. President. And we go in the back and my daughter's in the back and our mother's in the back and they're waiting. And I thought he'd be like every other politician, right? Because I got this thing with my daughter, my wife, and they come see me, I give them a thumbs up between segments. And they either give me a thumbs up or thumbs down, let me know how the show's going. So I looked at my daughter and she went, and the president leaned over and he was like, what does that mean? Who's that? I said, oh, that's my daughter. She said the segment was okay. And he started laughing. And he's like, can I meet her? And can I meet your wife? And I was like, sure, Mr. President. And I expected just like, you know how it is, man. They say that. And then once they get in the back, they're gone, bro.
Like Hollywood, yeah.
Yeah. And he gets back there. He talked to my daughter for 20 minutes about soccer, equestrian ride and like how his girls do it. Because my daughter rides horses. She's actually getting ready to go to Wellington to compete. She's 10 years old and she's competing with the 16-year-olds. And they're just shooting. He asked her, he's like, hey, how'd I do? Was I as funny as your dad? And she was like, you did good, but you talk too much. Bruh, I was about to gig myself. Well, this has been nice. And he laughed, and like, dude had a sense of humor, and I could just tell by the way he was talking, man. He's a grandfather, he's a dad, right? And we just hit off with that. And then his personal assistant asked for my number, and he says, hey, you want to interview? You want to sit down and talk about some stuff? He's like, I will always make time to talk to real men. He's like, that's what I need is men, not yes men that I'm surrounded with, men who will just tell it like it is. And I was like, cool. You know, again, didn't think it was probably going to happen because people say stuff, you know, in our business, like, hey, man, this, that, whatever. And these people call back like a week later and like, hey, we can do it this day at Trump Tower, have Tyrus come. And we filmed it, we shot it. He was late for he had the big Catholic dinner, but he was talking to me so long, he didn't read any of his jokes or anything for that night. We put it on the thing, it blew up, and a lot of people, because I just talked about the human side of things, you know, and everybody, it just kind of blew up, showing the human side of him, talking about the deeds he's done in his career. I wanted to talk about influences in boxing, because he learned a lot from Muhammad Ali. He learned a lot from Don King, especially how to talk and talk trash. He learned a lot from wrestling. Like, that's all part of his background.
And Ali learned his Gorgeous George.
Dude, I was telling people in 2016 when he had his run, I'm like, everybody was like, they were surprised. I'm like, dude, just go back and watch his promos in ring at Raw and just watch him in front of these crowds. He's doing the exact same shtick. He's just wrestling promos, branding, you know, cutting cutting people down. Right, exactly. And I was just like, the funny thing to me was, because there's a lot of lefties in the wrestling business. I was shocked at the amount of the wrestling community that was against him, that couldn't appreciate his like, dude, are you kidding me? This guy's just doing what we do and showing, like, you know, but how easy it would be for any of us to maybe do this for a living too, you know?
You would have thought when I started working at Fox and talking about President Trump and supporting being a Republican, you would have thought I murdered orphans in the wrestling world. And there's only two people that would book me, Conan and Billy from NWA. That's it. Like when I went to Mexico, and that's the crazy part. When I went to Mexico, and we had, what was there, 20,000 people in that stadium that day? Yeah, there wasn't one boo. You know what I'm saying? And it was like, and Conan was like, no, you work, you're going to do the thing, you're here. Everyone else was like, ooh, you know, I don't know. Right. Or secretly texting me saying, good job, bro. And the more I kept on, especially when I was saying that the election was not even close.
Yo, what's up? I just want to thank you guys for watching this clip. Don't forget to hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. And join our YouTube membership for hours and hours of exclusive, unedited, uncensored content. And being a member will help you get involved in our upcoming live streams. Thank you for your support. Thank you for riding with us. I know you got a lot of other podcast choices, be it wrestling or other ones. And thank you for picking us. Boom.